They called her the forgotten daughter, the one who stood in shadows while her family shone under chandeliers. Kate Whitmore had learned to be invisible, to expect nothing, to want nothing. But on the night of her brother's wedding, beneath the golden glow of Ashborne Hall, something impossible happened. The Duke of Everley, the most powerful man in England, the one every woman desired and every man feared, looked directly at her. And in a voice that made her blood run cold and warm all at once, he whispered 5 words that would change everything. "Pretend you are with me. Now, let us step into England, 1892, into a world of silk and scandal, where one woman's humiliation became the beginning of an impossible love." The chandeliers of Ashborne Hall burned like captured stars, their gas flames casting trembling shadows across walls draped in cream silk and late autumn roses. The air tasted of champagne and expensive perfume, of laughter that cut sharper than crystal, of a world Kate Whitmore had never truly belonged to, despite being born into its edges. She stood near the conservatory doors, her hands folded carefully over the waist of a dress that had been her mother's 10 years ago, altered and restitched to fit her smaller frame. The pale blue fabric, once fashionable, now whispered of economy and careful fingers working by candlelight. Around her, women glided in Worth gowns from Paris, their jewels catching light with each movement, their voices bright with the confidence of those who had never questioned their place in the world. Kate had learned long ago not to question hers. She had learned to be the daughter who asked for nothing, who caused no trouble, who could be forgotten in the corner of a ballroom while her brother Thomas danced with his radiant bride, and her mother held court among the other matrons, finally elevated by her son's fortunate marriage to Lydia Fairchild, daughter of a railroad magnate. The orchestra swelled into a waltz. Couples swept across the polished floor like leaves caught in a golden current. Kate watched them with the detached appreciation of someone observing a painting in a gallery, beautiful but untouchable, never meant for her. Someone laughed nearby, high and cutting. Kate did not need to turn to know it was Lydia, her new sister-in-law, surrounded by her bridesmaids like a queen among her ladies. The laughter came again, and this time Kate caught her own name floating on its cruel edge. Poor Kate, still unmarried at 24. Perhaps she hopes to catch the eye of one of the groomsmen, though I cannot imagine which one would want such a drab little sparrow. The words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples of quiet agreement through the cluster of young women. Kate felt her face burn, felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came from being seen and dismissed in the same breath. She had thought foolishly that tonight she might be allowed to simply exist, to be happy for Thomas without being reminded of everything she was not. She turned toward the conservatory doors, needing air, needing the darkness beyond the glass, where no one would watch her struggle to keep her composure. Her hand had just touched the cold brass handle when another voice cut through the music, lower, but no less poisonous. "I heard she tried to catch Edwin Pierce last season, but even he would not have her. Imagine being rejected by Edwin Pierce." The titters that followed felt like needles against Kate's skin. Edwin Pierce, with his carefully groomed mustache and his wandering eye, who had paid her attention just long enough to make her hope, before moving on to someone prettier, richer, more worthy of his mediocre affections. Kate pushed through the doors into the conservatory, where the air hung thick with the scent of ferns and night-blooming jasmine. The glass walls rose around her like a cage of stars, the darkness beyond pressing close. She walked quickly between the planters, past the marble fountain where water trickled over stone cherubs, toward the far door that led to the terrace. Behind her, the music continued. The laughter continued. The world continued as it always did, indifferent to the small agonies of those it deemed insignificant. She reached the terrace and stopped at the stone balustrade, gripping its cold edge with both hands. The night air moved cool against her flushed cheeks. Rain hung in the clouds overhead, not yet falling but promising to, making the darkness feel close and intimate. Below, the gardens of Ashborne Hall stretched into shadow, formal hedges and gravel paths disappearing into black. Kate closed her eyes and let herself feel it, just for a moment. The loneliness. The bitter understanding that she would always be the sister who did not matter, the daughter who was kept because duty demanded it, but never celebrated, never chosen, never seen as anything more than an obligation or worse, an object of pity. Tears pressed hot behind her eyelids. She fought them back with the practice of years, breathing slowly through her nose, counting the breaths, telling herself that this too would pass, that she had survived worse than Lydia's casual cruelty and would survive this as well. A footstep sounded on the stone behind her. Kate's eyes flew open. She straightened quickly, swiping at her face with the back of her hand, mortified that someone had followed her, that her moment of weakness might become tomorrow's gossip. "I did not mean to intrude." The voice was male, deep and measured, with an edge of something Kate could not quite identify. She turned slowly, her heart pounding, and found herself looking at a man who stood at the conservatory door like a figure cut from shadow and starlight. He was tall, dressed in evening clothes that fit him with the kind of perfection that spoke of London tailors and old money. His dark hair was swept back from a face that might have been called handsome, if not for the severity of its lines. The sharp jaw and high cheekbones, the mouth set in a way that suggested he rarely smiled and found little reason to. But it was his eyes that stopped Kate's breath in her throat. Dark grey, almost colourless in the dim light from the hall behind him, they fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel suddenly, shockingly visible. She recognised him, though they had never been introduced. Everyone in England knew James Cavendish, Duke of Everley. He appeared in the society papers with the regularity of royalty, always photographed at some function or another, always alone since the death of his young Duchess 3 years ago. The rumours about him were endless, that he was cold as winter stone, that he had loved his wife so completely her death had frozen something vital in him, that he was the richest, most powerful, most dangerous man in England, and no one dared cross him. "Your Grace," Kate managed, dropping into a curtsy that felt clumsy and inadequate. "I apologize. I did not know anyone was here." He moved forward with the deliberate grace of someone accustomed to command, stopping a few feet from her. Up close, she could see the threads of silver at his temples, the faint lines around his eyes that suggested he was older than the papers claimed, or perhaps simply wearier. "You have nothing to apologize for," he said quietly. "The offense tonight was not yours." Kate felt her face flame again. He had heard then. He had been somewhere in that glittering crowd and heard Lydia's mockery, heard the laughter, heard her name dragged through the casual cruelty of people who had nothing better to do than sharpen their tongues on those weaker than themselves. "I should return inside," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She moved to step past him, desperate to escape before the humiliation could deepen, before he could offer her pity or worse, advice on how to better endure her place in the world. His hand moved, not touching her but raising slightly as if to stop her. "Wait." Kate froze. She had been given orders all her life, from her mother, from Thomas, from everyone who believed they knew better than she did what was good for her. But this was different. This was not an order. This was a request, offered in a voice that held something she had never heard directed at her before. Respect. He studied her face in the dim light, and Kate had the strange sensation that he was truly seeing her, not the dress or the lack of jewels or the tear-stained cheeks, but something deeper, something she had kept hidden for so long she had almost forgotten it existed. "You should not have to endure such treatment," he said at last. "Not from them, not from anyone." The words unlocked something in Kate's chest, something painful and raw. She shook her head, unable to speak, unable to explain that this was simply how her world worked, that she had no power to change it, that survival meant accepting what could not be altered. But the Duke of Everley was not finished. He took one step closer, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of sandalwood and something else, something dark and expensive that made her pulse quicken. And then he spoke the words that would change everything. "Pretend you are with me." Kate's breath caught. She stared at him, certain she had misheard, that the stress of the evening had twisted his words into something impossible. "Your Grace, I do not understand." His expression did not change, but something flickered in those grey eyes, something that might have been determination or perhaps a decision made and committed to despite its cost. "Return to that ballroom on my arm. Let them see you with me. Let them wonder what they have overlooked, what power they have underestimated." He paused and his voice dropped lower, intimate in a way that made Kate's skin prickle with awareness. "Pretend if you must. But let me give you what they have denied: respect, visibility. A moment where you are not the forgotten sister, but the woman who walks beside a duke. The rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, pattering against the stone and the glass behind them. Kate felt each drop like a small shock against her skin. She could not move, could not think, could only stare at this man who had appeared from the darkness like something from a story, offering her not rescue, but something far more dangerous. A choice. Thunder rumbled in the distance. The Duke extended his arm, formal and deliberate, waiting, and Kate Whitmore, who had never been chosen, who had learned to want nothing, felt something crack open inside her chest, something that tasted like hope and terror in equal measure. Her hand trembled as she reached for him. Their eyes met and held. The world held its breath. Then her fingers touched the fine wool of his sleeve, and the choice was made. The rain fell harder, drumming against the terrace stones with a rhythm that matched Kate's wild heartbeat. Her fingers rested on the Duke of Everleigh's sleeve, and through the fine wool, she felt the solid warmth of his arm anchoring her to this impossible moment. He stood perfectly still, his gaze holding hers with an intensity that blurred the rest of the world. The ballroom music seemed distant now, muffled by rain and glass and the roaring in her ears. "Are you certain, Your Grace?" The words escaped before she could stop them, small and breathless. "They will talk, they will say terrible things." A flicker crossed his face, too quick to name. "Let them talk. They have proven themselves cruel. What they say about you reveals more about them than it ever could about you. But you," she whispered, her throat tight, "your reputation, someone like you." He repeated her unspoken thought as if tasting it, finding it bitter. His free hand rose slowly, deliberately, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, his fingers touched her chin, tilting her face toward his. "Miss Whitmore, do you know what I see when I look at you?" Kate could not speak. The rain soaked her shoulders, plastering loose strands of hair against her neck, but she felt only the warmth of his touch. "I see a woman who has endured cruelty with grace, who came to celebrate her brother, despite knowing she would be mocked, who has more courage than everyone in that ballroom combined." His thumb brushed along her jaw, feather light. "That is what I see. If society cannot see it, then society is blind." The words carved themselves into her chest, too beautiful and too painful to accept. She had believed herself invisible for so long that courage felt like a foreign concept. "I am afraid," she admitted, "afraid they will hurt you because of me." Something softened in his expression, a crack in his austere mask. "Then we will face them together, but only if you wish it. I will not force you into anything. The choice must be yours." Thunder cracked overhead. Kate looked toward the conservatory doors, toward the golden light spilling through glass, toward the world that had dismissed her so easily. Fear coiled in her stomach, cold and familiar, but beneath the fear, something else stirred. Something that had been sleeping so long she had forgotten its name. Anger. Not the hot, destructive kind, but the quiet, steady anger of someone pushed too far. She placed her hand more firmly on his arm. "I wish it, Your Grace." The corner of his mouth lifted, barely perceptible, but unmistakably a smile. "James," he said quietly, "when we are alone, you may call me James." Before Kate could process the intimacy of that offer, he was moving, guiding her back through the conservatory. They passed the fountain, the ferns brushing her wet skirt, the night-blooming jasmine releasing perfume into air, thick with rain and possibility. At the ballroom door, he paused. Kate felt every eye turning toward them, felt conversation faltering like a music box winding down. The chandeliers blazed overhead, suddenly too bright, exposing every water stain on her dress. Her courage wavered. Her hand tightened on his arm. The Duke leaned closer. His breath stirred the damp hair at her temple. "You are not alone. Not anymore." Then he stepped forward, and she moved with him. The ballroom fell silent. Not the comfortable silence of a lull in conversation, but the shocked, breathless silence of witnessing something inexplicable. The Duke of Everleigh, who attended functions out of obligation and left quickly, who had shown no interest in any woman since his Duchess died, was walking through the crowd with Kate Whitmore on his arm. Kate kept her eyes forward, spine straight, trying to channel his unshakable composure. She felt the stares like physical touches, heard whispers starting, rustling through the crowd like wind through dead leaves. Is that Kate Whitmore, with the Duke of Everleigh? Impossible. But there he was, moving with the easy authority of someone who had never questioned his right to be anywhere. People parted automatically, creating a path across the polished floor. The orchestra stumbled back into a waltz. Near the refreshment table, Kate saw her mother frozen with a glass of punch halfway to her lips, expression pure shock. Beside her, Thomas stood with Lydia, his bride's face pale beneath her pearl-encrusted veil, mouth slightly open. A servant appeared at the Duke's elbow carrying a silver tray. On it lay a single handkerchief, snowy white, embroidered with the Everleigh coat of arms. "Your Grace," the servant murmured, bowing. "You requested this." James took the handkerchief and turned to Kate, movements deliberate, ensuring everyone could see. Then, with infinite gentleness, he lifted the fabric to her face and dabbed at the rain on her cheeks, at the traces of tears she thought she had wiped away. The gesture was so intimate, so unexpectedly tender that heat flooded Kate's face, but she did not pull away. Something in his eyes held her steady, promised this was not pity. This was respect, given publicly, impossible to misinterpret. When he finished, he folded the handkerchief and pressed it into her palm, closing her fingers around it. "Keep it. A lady should always have something of quality at hand." The implication landed like a stone in still water. Her old dress, her lack of accessories, all markers of reduced circumstances, became irrelevant in the face of a duke offering his personal linen marked with his family crest. New whispers rippled outward. From the crowd's edge, a man stepped forward. Kate's stomach dropped as she recognized Edwin Pierce, his expression a careful mask of concern hiding malice. "Your Grace," Edwin said, tone oozing false solicitude. "How generous to show such charity to Miss Whitmore. She has had a difficult evening, I fear." The word charity hung in the air like poison. James did not turn immediately. When he did, his movement was slow, controlled, predatory. He looked at Edwin the way a wolf might look at prey. "Charity." The Duke's voice was soft but carried clearly. "No, Mr. Pierce, you misunderstand me entirely." He shifted, drawing Kate closer. The protective gesture was unmistakable. "I do not offer charity. I offer respect, something Miss Whitmore deserves and has been denied by those who should have known better." His gaze swept over Edwin, over Lydia, over everyone who had laughed. Perhaps the difficulty of her evening lies not in her circumstances, but in the company she has been forced to keep. The insult landed like a slap. Edwin's face flushed red. Several women gasped. Lydia's hand flew to her throat. Kate felt dizzy, caught between terror and exhilaration. No one spoke to Edwin Pierce like that. No one challenged the bride at her own wedding. No one stood up for the forgotten sister. But James Cavendish, Duke of Everleigh, had done all three. He looked down at Kate, expression gentling. "Miss Whitmore, would you do me the honor of walking with me? I find the air in here has become rather stale." Kate found her voice somewhere deep inside. "The honor would be mine, Your Grace." His hand covered hers on his arm. The ballroom watched, speechless, as the most powerful man in England led the forgotten sister toward the doors. Behind them, whispers exploded into full conversation, questions and speculation blending into a roar that chased them from the room. The ballroom doors closed with a soft click. The noise cut off, leaving them in the corridor's relative quiet, where gaslights flickered and portraits stared with painted eyes. Kate's legs trembled. Adrenaline drained away, leaving her shaking. James turned immediately, hands steady on her shoulders. "Breathe. You are safe. You did beautifully." "I did nothing," Kate whispered. "You did everything. You stood beside me. You did not run. You did not apologize for existing." His thumbs traced small circles on her shoulders, grounding, comforting. "That was everything, Miss Whitmore." "Kate." He blinked. "Excuse me? My name is Kate." Her voice shook, but held strength, new and fragile. "If I may call you James when we are alone, then you should call me Kate." For a long moment he simply looked at her. Then that almost smile returned, warming his severe features. "Kate," he repeated, testing it. Very well. The way he said her name, careful and deliberate as if it was something precious, made her chest ache. Thunder rolled again outside, closer now. The storm had truly arrived. But here in this quiet corridor, Kate Whitmore felt safer than she had in years. And the Duke of Everley, who had not smiled since his Duchess died, looked at her as if she were worth every scandal they had just created. The corridor stretched before them, lined with portraits, whose painted eyes followed their passage. Kate's hand remained on James's arm, her fingers trembling against the fine wool of his coat. The ballroom sounds had dimmed to a distant murmur. James guided her past gilded sconces and marble busts, his steps measured and unhurried, as if he had not just ignited the scandal of the season. "Where are we going?" Kate asked. "Away from vultures." He glanced down, his severe features softening in the flickering gaslight. "You need a moment to breathe. So do I." The admission surprised her. Perhaps even dukes needed to escape sometimes, to shed the armor of indifference they wore in public. A knock sounded behind them. A footman appeared, his young face flushed. "Your Grace, Lord Whitmore requests the presence of his sister in the East Parlor. Immediately." Kate's stomach dropped. Thomas would demand an explanation for her scandalous behavior. "Tell Lord Whitmore that Miss Whitmore will join him shortly," James said coolly. "I will escort her." "Your Grace, I believe Lord Whitmore wished to speak with his sister privately. Then Lord Whitmore will be disappointed." James moved to Kate's side. "Miss Whitmore is under my protection now. Where she goes, I go." The footman bowed and retreated. Kate felt panic rising. "James, you cannot. This is my family. I should face them alone." "No." His voice was gentle but implacable. "You have faced them alone your entire life. You will not do so tonight. But they will be furious. Let them." He turned to face her fully, hands finding her shoulders. "I am the Duke of Everley. If your brother wishes to berate you for accepting my protection, he will do so in front of me, and I will make certain he understands the consequences." Kate searched his face for doubt or hesitation. She found none. "Why?" she asked. "Why risk so much for someone you barely know?" His hands slid to cradle her face, achingly gentle. "Because in one evening, you have reminded me what it feels like to care about something beyond duty. Because your courage deserves to be rewarded, not punished. Because I looked at you in the rain, and I saw someone worth fighting for." Kate felt tears prick her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. "Then I will face them," she said, voice steadier, "but not alone." "Never alone," he echoed. "I promise you that." They walked through corridors past shocked servants and whispering guests. Kate kept her head high, drawing strength from his presence. The East Parlor door stood open. Inside, Thomas paced like a caged animal, wedding finery rumpled, face flushed. Her mother sat rigidly by the fireplace, expression carved from ice. Lydia stood by the window, still in her wedding gown, pretty face twisted with rage. They all turned when Kate and James appeared. "Kate," Thomas began, voice tight. "What in God's name do you think you are doing?" James stepped forward, placing himself between Kate and her brother. "Lord Whitmore, I suggest you moderate your tone. Your sister has done nothing wrong. Your Grace, this is a family matter. I must insist you allow me to speak with Kate privately. And I must insist you show Miss Whitmore the respect she deserves." James's voice dropped dangerously soft. "She attended your wedding out of love, only to be mocked and humiliated by your bride and her companions. If anyone should answer for their behavior tonight, it is not Kate." Lydia gasped. "How dare you? This is my wedding." Kate had no right to make herself the center of attention. She did not make herself anything. James turned his cold gaze on Lydia. "You and your friends did that when you decided her pain was entertainment. What I did was ensure your cruelty did not go unanswered." Helena Whitmore rose, voice icy. "Your Grace, while we are grateful for your concern, Kate is our daughter. We know what is best for her." "Do you?" James asked quietly. "Because from where I stand, you have allowed her to be treated as less than she is for far too long. That ends tonight." The room fell into stunned silence. Thomas found his voice. "Your Grace, surely you understand that any association between you and my sister will cause talk. Her reputation will be ruined. Her reputation was being ruined long before I intervened. James's eyes were steel. At least now, if people talk about Kate Whitmore, they will speak her name with respect. Because she has the Duke of Everleigh's protection, and I do not give that lightly. He turned to Kate, expression softening. Miss Whitmore, would you care to return to the ballroom? I believe we left rather abruptly, and I would like to finish what we started. Kate understood what he was offering. A chance to face the gossip head-on, to walk back into that room and show them she would not be cowed or shamed into hiding. She met her brother's eyes, then her mother's, then Lydia's. She saw their shock, their disapproval, their inability to understand what had shifted tonight. Then she looked at James, at this man who had given her something she had never dared to want. A choice, a voice, a chance. I would be honored, Your Grace, she said clearly. She took his arm, and together they walked out, leaving her family in stunned silence. The ballroom fell quiet as they entered. Every eye turned toward them. The orchestra faltered mid-note, then resumed with uncertain strings. James led Kate directly to the center of the floor. Couples stopped mid-step, creating a space around them as if they stood in the eye of a storm. He turned to face her, his movements deliberate, ensuring every person in that glittering room could witness what came next. He bowed, formal and deep, the kind of bow reserved for royalty or the highest-ranking ladies of the realm. Then he extended his hand. Miss Whitmore, may I have this dance? The question rang out in the silence, clear as a bell, impossible to misinterpret. This was not a rescue. This was not charity. This was a public declaration that Kate Whitmore was worthy of being asked, worthy of being seen, worthy of standing in the center of a ballroom with the most powerful man in England. Kate's hand trembled as she placed it in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady, and she felt the world narrow to just this moment, just this man, just this impossible choice she was making to step forward instead of shrinking back. The orchestra swelled into a waltz, the melody rich and sweeping. James pulled her into the dance frame with the practiced ease of someone who had learned to waltz before he could read. His right hand settled at her waist, proper but unmistakably possessive. Her left hand rested on his shoulder, feeling the solid muscle beneath expensive fabric. And then they began to move. Kate had danced before, stilted practice sessions with a bored dancing master when she was 15, awkward turns at country assemblies, where young men asked her only because their mothers insisted. But this was different. This was not practice or obligation. This was flight. James moved with absolute confidence, guiding her through turns and glides that made her dress swirl around her ankles like water. He did not speak, but his eyes never left her face, grey and intense and filled with something that made her breath catch. Around them, slowly, hesitantly, other couples began to join the dance, but they kept their distance, as if afraid to come too close to whatever magic or madness had seized the Duke of Everleigh and the forgotten Whitmore daughter. Your family will not forgive this easily, James said quietly, his voice pitched for her ears alone. I know. You will face difficulties, gossip, speculation, judgment. I know, Kate repeated, but her voice was steady now, anchored by the strength she felt flowing from him through every point of contact between them. And yet you choose to stay here, dancing with me, letting them all see. Kate met his eyes directly. I choose to be seen. For the first time in my life, I choose to be seen. Something blazed in his expression, fierce and bright. Good, he said, because I intend to make certain you are never invisible again. The waltz swept them into a turn, and Kate caught a glimpse of the watching faces. Some showed shock, others disapproval, a few even envy. But none showed pity anymore. None showed dismissal. They showed uncertainty. And uncertainty, Kate was beginning to understand, was far more powerful than contempt. The music swelled toward its crescendo. James pulled her slightly closer, not enough to be scandalous, but enough that she could feel the warmth of him, smell the sandalwood, and something darker that was uniquely his. When this dance ends, he murmured, the storm will truly begin. Are you ready? Kate thought of her mother's ice-carved face, of Thomas's anger, of Lydia's rage. She thought of every whispered insult, every overlooked moment, every time she had made herself small to fit into spaces that were never meant for her. And then she thought of this man who had appeared from the darkness like something from a story, offering her not rescue, but recognition, not salvation, but the chance to save herself. "I am ready," she said. The final notes of the waltz echoed through the ballroom. James brought them to a stop in the exact center of the floor, under the blazing chandeliers where everyone could see. He did not release her immediately. Instead, he lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it, a gesture so intimate and deliberate that gasps rippled through the crowd. Then he offered his arm once more, and together they walked toward the doors that led to the conservatory, toward the storm that raged beyond the glass, toward whatever consequences awaited them. Behind them, the ballroom erupted into frantic whispers, but Kate Whitmore no longer cared what they said. She had been seen, she had been chosen, and the world would never be quite the same. The conservatory doors closed behind them, muffling the chaos they had left in their wake. The glass structure stretched before them like a cathedral built from starlight and shadows, its iron framework dark against the storm-bruised sky. Rain hammered against the panes with renewed fury, turning the world beyond into a blur of water and wind. Kate released a breath she had not known she was holding. Her legs trembled with the aftermath of adrenaline, and she pressed one hand against a marble planter to steady herself. The cool stone grounded her, reminded her this was real. Behind her, James moved quietly, his footsteps sure despite the dim light. She did not turn, could not turn. If she looked at him now, she feared she might shatter. "Kate." His voice was gentle, concerned. "Are you well?" She laughed, the sound brittle and strange. "I do not know. I do not know what I am." The honesty surprised her. She had spent so long carefully moderating her words that speaking raw truth felt like standing naked in a crowded room. James moved closer, but did not touch her. Instead, he stood just beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, could smell the faint scent of sandalwood and rain. "You are angry," he said quietly, "and terrified, and exhilarated. You are feeling everything at once because you have finally allowed yourself to feel at all." Kate turned to look at him, surprised by the accuracy. "How do you know? Because I remember what it felt like." His gaze drifted to the rain-streaked glass. "When Caroline died, I stopped feeling anything. It was easier than the alternative, safer. And then tonight I watched them mock you, and I felt rage so pure it burned away 3 years of carefully constructed numbness." The confession hung between them, intimate and raw. Kate had heard the rumors about the late Duchess of Everleigh, about the love match that had scandalized society, about the fever that had taken her in a week, leaving James a widower at 30. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I did not mean to force you back into feeling. Do not be sorry." He turned to face her fully. "You gave me something back that I thought I had lost forever. The ability to care about someone else's pain more than my own." Thunder cracked overhead, so close the glass rattled. Kate flinched and James's hand lifted as if to steady her, then stopped, hovering in the space between them. She saw hesitation in his eyes, the uncertainty of a man who no longer trusted himself to touch someone gently. "It is just thunder," she said softly, though her heart raced. "I know." His hand lowered slowly. "But I also know what it is to be afraid of storms that have nothing to do with weather. Tell me about her, about Caroline." James was silent for so long, Kate thought he might refuse. Then he spoke, his voice low and measured. She was light. Not in the frivolous sense, but in the way that light illuminates dark spaces. She made me laugh. She made me believe that being a duke was about using power to protect people who could not protect themselves. He paused, jaw tightening. "When she died, I buried that belief with her. I told myself caring too much only led to pain." "And now?" Kate asked. "Now I find myself standing in a conservatory, with a woman I met hours ago, feeling things I swore I would never allow myself to feel again." He met her eyes, and the vulnerability in his gaze made her breath catch. "Now I am terrified, Kate, because I do not know if I can survive losing someone again." The honesty pierced her chest. "You will not lose me," she said. though the promise felt impossible to keep. You cannot know that. No. But I know that I have spent 24 years being afraid to want anything because I believed I was not worth the wanting. And tonight, you looked at me as if I were worth fighting for. So perhaps we can be terrified together. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the careful control he maintained. He lifted his hand again, and this time he did not stop. His fingers touched her cheek, gentle as falling snow, tracing the line of her jaw with infinite care. Kate held perfectly still, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. "I want to know you," James said quietly. "Not the version you show the world, but the real you. The one who stands in the rain and refuses to apologize for existing. What if the real me is not interesting enough to know?" His thumb brushed across her lower lip, and the touch sent heat coursing through her body. "Then I will have to disagree with you. Because the real you is the woman who walked back into that ballroom knowing she would be judged, who danced with me despite her fear, who is standing here now asking questions no one else would dare to ask." "I am not brave," Kate whispered. "Yes, you are. You simply have not realized it yet." Lightning illuminated the conservatory in brilliant white, turning the rain to liquid silver. In that flash, Kate saw James clearly, saw the lines of grief etched at the corners of his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the carefully controlled longing in the way he looked at her. And she saw something else, recognition. They were two people who had learned to survive by making themselves smaller, quieter, less visible. Two people who had forgotten what it meant to be fully alive. Until tonight. "What happens now?" Kate asked. "When we leave this conservatory, when the storm ends, when the gossip begins in earnest." James's hand slid from her cheek to rest against the base of her throat, where her pulse beat wild and fast. His touch was warm, grounding, impossibly gentle. "Now we decide if we want to continue pretending," he said, "or if we want to see where this might lead. And if it leads nowhere, if society tears us apart, then at least we will have tried. At least we will have chosen to reach for something real instead of settling for safety." His other hand rose to cup her face, framing it between his palms. "I am asking you to be brave with me, Kate, to step into the unknown and trust that we will find our way." Thunder rolled again, softer now, the storm beginning to move away. But in the conservatory, the real storm was just beginning. Kate raised her hands and placed them over his, feeling the strength in his fingers, the slight tremor that revealed he was not as controlled as he appeared. "I choose to be brave," she whispered. "I choose this." James closed his eyes, and for a moment he simply stood there holding her face as if she were something precious and breakable. When he opened his eyes again, the vulnerability was still there, but beneath it burned something else. Hope. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away, time to change her mind. But Kate did not move. She had spent her life retreating, and she would not retreat now. His forehead touched hers, and they breathed the same air, existing in the space between intention and action. The rain outside had softened to a whisper. "Stay with me," James murmured, so quietly she almost missed it. "Not just tonight. Stay with me while we figure out what this is." Kate's answer was to close the final distance between them, to press her lips to his in a kiss that was tentative and searching, a question asked in the language of touch. James responded with a sound that was half sigh, half surrender. His hands tightened on her face and the kiss deepened, no longer tentative but deliberate, claiming. Kate felt herself melting against him, felt the world narrow to just this moment, just this man, just this impossible choice to be brave. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers again. His voice was rough when he spoke. "I am going to court you properly, Kate Whitmore. I am going to call on you and send you flowers and endure your family's scrutiny. I am going to give society nothing to criticize except the fact that a duke has chosen to care for someone they deemed unworthy. And I am going to prove them wrong," Kate said, finding strength in her voice she did not know she possessed. "I'm going to prove that I was worth choosing all along." James smiled, and in that smile Kate saw the man he had been, before grief had carved him hollow. "You already have." Through the glass walls, the first hints of dawn touched the eastern sky with pale gold. The longest night of Kate's life was ending, but the story was only just beginning. Dawn broke over London with the reluctant grey light of late autumn, painting the streets in shades of pewter and ash. Kate stood at the window of a small sitting room in Ashborne Hall, watching as carriages began to depart, their occupants eager to spread the night's scandal through drawing rooms across the city. She had not slept, could not sleep. Her lips still tingled from James's kiss, her skin still warm from his touch. But beneath the wonder and the fear, a new emotion had taken root: defiance. Behind her, the door opened without warning. Kate turned to find her mother standing in the threshold, dressed in traveling clothes, her face a mask of rigid control that Kate knew all too well. It was the expression Eleanor Whitmore wore when she was about to deliver a pronouncement she expected to be obeyed without question. "Kate." Her mother's voice was ice. "We are leaving. Now. Gather your things." Kate remained by the window, her hands folded carefully at her waist. "Good morning, Mother. I trust you slept well." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Do not play games with me, girl. You have made a spectacle of yourself, and I will not allow you to compound the damage. We leave for the country within the hour." The country. Of course, the familiar solution to any problem that threatened the family's standing. Hide the embarrassment, bury the scandal, pretend it never happened. "I am not going to the country," Kate said quietly. The words fell into the room like stones into still water. Eleanor stared at her daughter, as if she had suddenly begun speaking in tongues. "I beg your pardon." Kate lifted her chin, drawing on the courage James had helped her find. "I said I am not going. I am staying in London. You most certainly are not." Eleanor swept into the room, closing the door behind her with a decisive click. "Kate, I do not know what delusion the Duke of Everley has planted in your head, but you must understand reality. Men like him do not marry women like you. He was being kind, nothing more, and you have mistaken kindness for something it is not." The words were designed to cut, to reduce, to make Kate small again, and perhaps 24 hours ago they would have succeeded. But Kate had been seen, had been chosen, had been kissed in a conservatory while storm raged outside and something far more dangerous raged within. "He was not being kind," Kate said. "He was being honest. And I will not allow you to diminish what happened simply because it does not fit your understanding of the world." Eleanor's face flushed. "You foolish child. Do you think society will accept this? Do you think anyone will believe a duke developed feelings for you in the span of a single evening? They will call you grasping, opportunistic, pathetic." "Let them," Kate said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "I have been called worse by better people." The door opened again and Lydia entered, still in her wedding gown, though it was now rumpled and stained with champagne. Her pretty face was twisted with barely suppressed fury. "Is she still refusing to leave?" Lydia demanded, addressing Eleanor as if Kate were not present. "This is intolerable. She has ruined my wedding." The guests could speak of nothing but her shameless display with the Duke. And now she compounds it by refusing to disappear quietly. Kate turned to face her new sister-in-law. "I am sorry your wedding was not everything you hoped, Lydia. But I did not make myself the center of attention. You and your friends did that when you decided my humiliation was entertainment," Lydia gasped. "How dare you? I showed you nothing but kindness. You showed me cruelty disguised as concern." Kate's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. "You mocked my dress, my unmarried state, my very existence. And when someone finally defended me, you could not bear that the invisible sister had become visible." Thomas appeared in the doorway, his face haggard with exhaustion and something that might have been shame. "Kate," he said wearily, "please, this has gone far enough. Just come home to the country for a few weeks. Let the gossip die down." "And then what, Thomas?" Kate asked. "Return to being the sister you forget to invite to dinner. The daughter mother introduces with apologies. I will not go back to being invisible simply because it is more convenient for all of you." Eleanor's control cracked. "You ungrateful child. We have fed you, clothed you, given you a home despite our reduced circumstances. And this is how you repay us? By throwing yourself at the first man who shows you attention?" James's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Miss Whitmore threw herself at no one. I sought her company. I defended her honor. and I will not stand by while you rewrite last night's events to suit your narrative." They all turned. The Duke stood in the doorway, dressed in fresh clothes, his hair still damp from washing, his grey eyes cold as winter steel. He must have stayed at Ashborne Hall overnight, Kate realized, or returned at first light. "Your Grace," Eleanor said, rallying quickly. "Please forgive us. This is a family matter." "No, Mrs. Whitmore. This is a matter of respect. And Miss Whitmore is owed more than you seem willing to give." James moved into the room with the deliberate grace of a predator. "I heard your suggestion that she retreat to the country. I assume this is to protect her reputation." "Of course," Eleanor said, though uncertainty flickered in her eyes. "How interesting, because from what I observed last night, her reputation was being destroyed long before I intervened. In fact, it was being destroyed by members of her own family." James's gaze swept over Lydia, who paled. "So forgive me if I question whether hiding in the country will serve Miss Whitmore's interests, or merely your own convenience." Thomas stepped forward. "Your Grace, with all respect, you do not understand the complexities of our situation. Do I not?" James's voice was dangerously soft. "Let me see if I comprehend correctly. Your sister attended your wedding out of love and duty. She was mocked publicly by your bride and her companions. And now, rather than demanding an apology on her behalf, you wish to send her away so that you need not face the social consequences of your wife's cruelty." The accuracy of the assessment hung in the air, damning and irrefutable. "That is not fair," Thomas protested weakly. "Is it not?" James turned to Kate, and his expression softened imperceptibly. "Miss Whitmore, I came this morning to ask your permission to call on you properly, to begin a courtship as it should be begun, with attention and respect. But I will not do so if you prefer to return to the country with your family." The offer was deliberate, public, impossible to misunderstand. He was giving Kate the choice, but he was also making certain her family understood the stakes. Kate looked at her mother's rigid face, at Lydia's barely contained rage, at Thomas's exhausted defeat. She thought of all the years she had bent herself to fit their expectations, had made herself small to avoid causing trouble. And then she thought of James, who had looked at her in the rain and seen someone worth fighting for. "I would be honored to receive your calls, Your Grace," Kate said clearly. "I will remain in London." Eleanor made a sound of pure frustration. "Kate, be reasonable. Where will you stay? You cannot remain here, and you certainly cannot stay with the Duke unchaperoned." "She will stay with my aunt," James said calmly. "The Dowager Duchess of Harrington has already agreed to act as chaperone and sponsor. Miss Whitmore will want for nothing." The pronouncement landed like a thunderbolt. The Dowager Duchess of Harrington was one of the most powerful women in society, a woman whose approval could make or break a reputation. Eleanor opened and closed her mouth several times, searching for an argument that would not sound like pure selfishness. "Kate," Thomas tried again, "think about what you are doing. Think about the scandal." "I am thinking about it," Kate replied. "I am thinking that for the first time in my life, I am choosing what I want instead of accepting what others believe I deserve. And if that creates scandal, then so be it." James moved to her side, not touching but close enough that his presence felt like a shield. "Mrs. Whitmore, Lord Whitmore, Lady Whitmore, I suggest you return to the country as planned. Miss Whitmore and I will navigate London society together. And if you wish to maintain any relationship with her, I suggest you consider very carefully how you speak to her in the future." It was not a suggestion, it was a command, delivered with the absolute certainty of a man who had never been denied anything he truly wanted. Eleanor looked as if she had swallowed broken glass. Thomas's shoulders sagged in defeat. Lydia turned and swept from the room, her wedding dress trailing behind her like the tattered remnants of her triumph. "Come," Eleanor said stiffly to Thomas. "We have a journey ahead of us." They left without saying goodbye. Kate watched them go and felt something inside her chest ease, a weight she had carried so long she had forgotten it was there. When the door closed, James finally allowed himself to touch her, his hand finding hers and squeezing gently. "Are you well?" Kate looked up at him. This man who had appeared in her life like a storm and changed everything. "I am terrified," she admitted, "but I'm also free. And I think perhaps being terrified and free is better than being safe and suffocated." James smiled, and it was real and warm and full of promise. Then let us be terrified together." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it, his eyes never leaving hers. "Welcome to your new life, Kate Whitmore." Outside, carriages rattled away through London streets, carrying gossip and speculation, and the remnants of a family that had never truly seen her. But Kate no longer cared what they saw. She had found someone who looked at her and saw everything. The carriage that arrived for Kate at midday was not what she expected. She had imagined something grand and ostentatious, bearing the Everleigh crest in gold leaf, designed to announce its owner's status to everyone they passed. Instead, James handed her into an elegant but understated vehicle, its dark blue lacquer gleaming softly in the weak autumn sunlight. The interior was lined with dove-grey velvet, and a small brazier provided warmth against the chill that had settled over London after the storm. As the carriage pulled away from Ashborne Hall, Kate watched through the window as the only home she had known for the wedding festivities disappeared behind a corner. She felt no regret, only a strange mixture of relief and anticipation that made her heart beat faster. James sat across from her, maintaining proper distance, but his eyes never left her face. "You are very quiet," he observed. "I am thinking," Kate replied, turning from the window to meet his gaze, "about how quickly everything has changed. Yesterday morning, I was invisible. Tonight I will sleep under the protection of a dowager duchess. Tomorrow society will have 100 opinions about who I am and what I want, and none of them will know the truth, which is that I am terrified I will wake up and discover this was all a dream, that you will realize I am not worth the trouble I bring, that I will fail to be whatever it is you need me to be." James leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, closing the distance between them without crossing the line of propriety. "Kate, look at me." She did, caught by the intensity in his grey eyes. "I need you to understand something, and I need you to believe it. I am not rescuing you. I am not fixing you. I am not molding you into some ideal version that exists only in my imagination." His voice dropped lower, intimate, despite the rattle of wheels on cobblestones. "I am simply choosing to know you. The real you, whatever that means." Kate felt her throat tighten. "But what if the real me disappoints you? Then I will be disappointed." A slight smile touched his mouth. "Kate, I have been disappointed before. I have survived loss and grief and 3 years of feeling nothing. I'm not afraid of disappointment. I'm only afraid of wasting what time we have by pretending to be people we are not." The honesty of it pierced her chest. She realized in that moment that James was taking as great a risk as she was. He had spent years hiding behind his title and his grief, and now he was choosing to be vulnerable again. For her. "Tell me about your aunt," Kate said, needing to shift the conversation before emotion overwhelmed her. "The Dowager Duchess. Will she truly accept me?" James settled back against the velvet cushions, and something like amusement flickered across his features. "Aunt Beatrice does not accept anyone easily, but she loved Caroline, and when Caroline died, she told me that if I ever found someone who made me feel alive again, she would move heaven and earth to protect that person. And you believe I make you feel alive, Kate?" He said her name like a prayer and a promise. "You make me feel everything." The carriage swayed around a corner, and Kate gripped the edge of her seat to steady herself. Through the window she glimpsed the changing landscape as they left the fashionable streets behind and entered a quieter district where grand houses stood behind iron gates and ancient trees. "Is this where you live?" she asked. "Where I exist," James corrected quietly. "I have not truly lived anywhere since Caroline died. Everleigh House has been more mausoleum than home." He paused, then added, "But perhaps that will change now." The carriage slowed, then stopped before gates that opened onto a sweeping drive. Beyond, Kate could see a house that took her breath away. It was not the largest she had ever seen, but it was perhaps the most beautiful, built from honey-colored stone that seemed to glow in the afternoon light. Ivy climbed its walls, and tall windows reflected the grey sky like polished mirrors. "Welcome to Everleigh House," James said softly. A footman opened the carriage door and handed Kate down. She stood on the gravel drive, staring up at the house that would become part of her new life, and felt the weight of the moment settle over her like a cloak. James appeared at her side, offering his arm. "My aunt will not arrive until this evening. I thought perhaps you might like to see the house first, without an audience. Kate placed her hand on his arm, drawing strength from his steady presence. I would like that very much. They entered through doors that opened into an entrance hall paneled in dark wood and lit by windows set high in the walls. Portraits lined the corridor beyond, faces from centuries past watching their passage with painted eyes. James guided her through rooms filled with furniture draped in Holland covers, past libraries where dust motes danced in shafts of light, through galleries where the silence felt almost sacred. He spoke little, and Kate sensed he was showing her not just the house but pieces of himself he kept hidden from the world. Finally, they arrived at a long gallery on the second floor. Unlike the other rooms, this one was not shrouded. Afternoon light streamed through tall windows, illuminating portraits that hung in careful arrangement on the walls. The portrait gallery, James said quietly. Every Duke and Duchess of Everleigh for the past 300 years. He led her slowly along the gallery, pointing out ancestors with stories both tragic and triumphant. But Kate noticed he was moving toward one portrait in particular, placed in a position of honor near the windows, where the light touched it most gently. They stopped before it, and Kate's breath caught. The portrait showed a young woman with dark hair and laughing eyes, dressed in a gown of deep blue silk. She sat in a garden surrounded by roses, and there was something in her expression that spoke of joy so pure it seemed to radiate from the canvas. "Caroline," Kate whispered. "Yes." James's voice was rough with emotion. "Painted the summer before she died." She insisted on being portrayed in the garden rather than in some formal pose. She said she wanted to be remembered as she was, not as society expected a duchess to be. Kate looked at the woman who had owned James's heart, who had made him laugh and believe and love, and felt a complicated tangle of emotions she could not quite name. Not jealousy exactly, but something close. The knowledge that she was following in the footsteps of someone irreplaceable. She was beautiful, Kate said softly. She was. James moved closer to the portrait, his eyes tracing the painted features with obvious tenderness. But she was also stubborn and irreverent and utterly convinced that rules were made to be questioned. Society never quite knew what to make of her. He turned to look at Kate, and in his eyes, she saw both grief and something else. Something that looked like hope. "You remind me of her," he said. "Not in appearance, but in spirit. In the quiet way you refuse to accept the limitations others place on you. In your courage to choose yourself, even when it costs you everything familiar." Kate's eyes burned with unshed tears. "I'm afraid I will never measure up to her memory." James crossed to her in 2 strides, his hands finding her shoulders. "You do not need to measure up to anyone's memory, Kate. You only need to be yourself." He paused, his thumb brushing against her collarbone in a gesture so tender it made her heart ache. "Caroline would have liked you, I think. She would have seen the same strength in you that I see." "How can you be sure?" "Because she always saw people clearly, and because she made me promise before she died that I would not spend the rest of my life in mourning, that I would live again, fully and without guilt." James's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I'm trying to keep that promise, Kate, but I need your help. I need you to remind me what it feels like to hope." Kate reached up and covered his hands with hers, feeling the warmth of his skin, the slight tremor that revealed his vulnerability. "Then hope with me," she whispered. "Let us both be brave enough to reach for something new." The gallery fell silent around them, filled only with the sound of their breathing and the distant tick of a clock somewhere in the house. Outside, clouds moved across the sun, and shadows danced across the portrait of the woman who had loved this man first. James leaned his forehead against Kate's, and they stood there in the fading light, 2 people caught between grief and possibility, between what was lost and what might yet be found. "I am glad you are here," he murmured against her hair. "So am I," Kate breathed. And in that moment, standing in the gallery surrounded by the weight of history and legacy, Kate felt something shift inside her. She was no longer just the forgotten sister. She was Kate Whitmore, and she had chosen to step into the unknown with a man who saw her clearly. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The afternoon light had shifted, turning the portrait gallery into a space of gold and amber, where shadows stretched long across the polished floor. Kate stood before Caroline's portrait, studying the painted face of the woman who had been everything James had lost. She found no resentment in her heart, only a strange kinship with someone she would never meet. A woman who had loved fiercely and lived boldly and left behind a man who still carried her memory like a sacred trust. "I used to come here every day," James said quietly from behind her. "After she died, I would stand exactly where you were standing and try to remember what her laugh sounded like, what she smelled like, how her hand felt in mine." He moved to stand beside Kate, his gaze fixed on the portrait. But memories are cruel things. The more you reach for them, the more they slip away, until you are left holding nothing but the shape of what you lost. Kate felt her chest tighten at the raw pain in his voice. "When did you stop coming?" 6 months ago. I realized I was worshipping grief instead of honoring memory, that Caroline would have been furious with me for turning our love into a shrine." He exhaled slowly. She believed in living, Kate, fully and without apology, and I had forgotten how to do that. "Until last night," Kate said softly. "Until last night," James agreed. He turned to face her, and in the golden light his features seemed softer, more vulnerable. "Do you know what terrifies me most about this?" Kate shook her head, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "It is not society's judgment. It is not scandal or gossip or your family's disapproval." His hand rose slowly, giving her time to step back if she wished, and touched her face with infinite gentleness. "It is that I will fail you, that I will give you only the broken pieces of a man who loved once and lost everything, and it will not be enough." The confession landed between them like something fragile and precious. Kate understood suddenly that James's fear mirrored her own. He was afraid of being insufficient, just as she had always felt insufficient. Two people shaped by loss and invisibility, reaching for each other across the chasm of their wounds. "James," she whispered, turning her face into his palm, "you are not broken. You are grieving. There is a difference. Am I?" His thumb traced the curve of her cheekbone. "Sometimes I cannot tell anymore. Sometimes I think grief has carved away so much of who I was that there is nothing left worth offering." Kate reached up and covered his hand with both of hers, holding it against her face. "Then let me tell you what I see. I see a man who defended a stranger because cruelty offended him, who stood before society and declared that respect is not a gift to be bestowed, but a right to be recognized, who brought me to this gallery not to compete with the past, but to show me he trusts me with his pain." Her voice strengthened. "You are not broken, James. You are human, and that is more than enough." For a long moment, James simply looked at her, his grey eyes searching her face as if trying to memorize every detail. Then slowly, deliberately, he raised her hands to his lips and kissed each palm in turn, a gesture of reverence that made Kate's breath catch. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice rough, "and I need you to understand that I am saying this not because I expect anything from you, but because you deserve honesty." Kate waited, her heart pounding. "I am afraid of loving you," James said simply. "I am afraid because I know now what love costs. I know what it feels like to have your heart torn from your chest while you are still breathing. I know the weight of surviving when the person who made life worthwhile is gone." He paused, and his grip on her hands tightened. "But I am more afraid of not trying, more afraid of sending you away and spending the rest of my life wondering what might have been if I had just been brave enough to reach for you." Kate felt tears slip down her cheeks, hot and unstoppable. "You are the bravest person I know." "No," he said, a slight smile touching his lips. "You are. You chose to be seen when being invisible was safer. You walked back into that ballroom knowing you would be judged. You stood in this gallery and looked at the portrait of my dead wife without flinching or demanding I forget her. That is courage, Kate. Real, terrifying courage." "Then be courageous with me," Kate whispered. "Choose to try, even if we fail. Choose to hope, even if it hurts." James released one of her hands and cupped her face, tilting it up toward his. His eyes held hers with an intensity that made the rest of the world disappear. "Kate Whitmore, will you allow me to court you? Properly, honorably, in the full view of society and God and anyone else who wishes to watch. The question hung in the air between them, formal and old-fashioned and utterly sincere. Will you let me send you flowers and take you driving in Hyde Park and sit through tedious dinners with my aunt while she interrogates your character? Will you give me the chance to prove that what I feel for you is not gratitude or pity, but something real and true and worth fighting for? Kate's tears were falling freely now, but she did not care. Yes, she said, her voice breaking. Yes, James. 1,000 times yes. His smile transformed his face, making him look younger, lighter, as if some burden had been lifted. Thank God, he murmured, because I have already ordered the flowers. Kate laughed through her tears, the sound bright and startling in the quiet gallery. You were that confident? I was that hopeful. He leaned closer, his forehead touching hers. Hope is different from confidence. Hope is choosing to believe in possibility, even when you have no guarantee. And you, Kate Whitmore, have given me hope for the first time in 3 years. The clock somewhere in the house struck 5, the chimes echoing through empty rooms. James straightened reluctantly, though he did not release her face. My aunt will arrive within the hour, he said. I should go, allow you time to settle before she descends upon you with questions and opinions, and probably a few pointed observations about my character. Kate smiled. Will she approve of me? James's expression turned serious. She will see what I see. Someone worthy of being chosen. Someone strong enough to walk beside a duke without being diminished by the title. Someone who makes me want to live again, instead of merely existing. He lowered his hand slowly, and Kate felt the loss of his touch like a physical ache. But James was not finished. He took one of her hands in both of his and raised it to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that was both chaste and achingly intimate. I will call on you tomorrow morning, he said against her skin. If the weather permits, perhaps we might take that drive through Hyde Park I mentioned. Let society see us together in daylight, properly chaperoned, thoroughly respectable. And thoroughly scandalous, Kate added with a slight smile. James's eyes glinted with amusement. That too. But scandal with purpose is far more interesting than scandal from carelessness. He kissed her hand again, his lips lingering just a moment longer. Sleep well, Kate. Dream of possibilities instead of fears. I will if you will, she replied. He released her hand slowly, reluctantly, as if each finger required its own farewell. Then he bowed, formal and proper, the Duke of Everley once more, instead of simply James. Until tomorrow, Miss Whitmore. Until tomorrow, Your Grace. He walked toward the gallery door, his footsteps echoing on the polished floor. At the threshold, he paused and looked back at her, standing alone in the golden light with Caroline's portrait watching over her shoulder. Kate, he said softly, thank you. For what? For reminding me that the heart can survive breaking, that it can heal, however imperfectly, and beat again for someone new. Then he was gone, leaving Kate alone with the portraits and the fading light and the weight of promises made and yet to be kept. She turned back to Caroline's portrait, studying the painted eyes that seemed to hold wisdom and mischief in equal measure. I hope I can honor what you built with him, Kate whispered to the image. I hope I can make him happy. The portrait offered no answer, but somehow Kate felt no judgment in the painted gaze. Only blessing, as if the woman who had loved James first understood that love was not diminished by being shared, but multiplied. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Kate wrapped her arms around herself and allowed herself just for a moment to feel the full weight of what she had chosen. Fear, hope, possibility, love. And for the first time in her life, Kate Whitmore felt worthy of all of it. Kate could not sleep. She lay in the guest chamber the Dowager Duchess had assigned her, watching shadows dance across the ceiling as the fire in the hearth burned low. The room was beautiful, far more luxurious than anything she had known, but comfort was not what kept her awake. It was the memory of James's touch, the sound of his voice when he admitted his fear, the way he had looked at her in the gallery as if she were something precious and impossible. The clock struck 4. Dawn was still an hour away, but Kate could see the first hints of grey at the edges of the curtains. She rose from the bed, wrapping herself in the silk dressing gown Aunt Beatrice had provided, and moved to the window. The gardens of Everleigh House stretched below, formal hedges and gravel paths disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness. And there, walking alone beneath the bare trees, was a figure she recognized instantly. James. Kate's heart began to pound. She should stay in her room, should maintain propriety, should not risk the reputation James was trying to protect by seeking him out in the hours before dawn when the household still slept. But her hand was already reaching for the door handle. Her feet were already carrying her down the corridor, past sleeping servants' quarters, down the back stairs that led to the gardens. The morning air was sharp with cold, turning her breath to mist. Kate pulled the dressing gown tighter and followed the gravel path toward the place where she had seen James disappear between the hedges. She found him in a small clearing, standing before a stone bench half hidden by climbing roses that had long since shed their blooms. He had changed from his formal clothes into simpler attire, and his dark hair was disheveled as if he had run his hands through it repeatedly. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, and the expression that crossed his face was pure relief mixed with concern. "Kate, you should not be out here. It is freezing." "Neither should you," she replied, moving closer. "Yet here we are. I could not sleep." He studied her face in the dim light. "Did I wake you?" "I tried to be quiet." "You did not wake me. I was already awake, watching the window, watching you." Something shifted in his expression, a heat that had nothing to do with the absent sun. "You should not have followed me out here. If anyone sees us unchaperoned at this hour." "Then we will face the scandal together," Kate said, echoing his words from the conservatory. "Is that not what we agreed?" James closed the distance between them in 3 strides. His hands found her shoulders, and even through the silk of her dressing gown she could feel the warmth of his touch. "You are shivering." Not from cold. The admission hung in the air between them, dangerous and honest. James's hands tightened on her shoulders, and Kate saw the war happening behind his eyes. Propriety versus desire, honor versus need. Kate made the choice for both of them. She raised her hands and placed them flat against his chest, feeling his heart pounding as wildly as her own. "James," she whispered, "I did not come out here to be proper. I came because I could not bear to be apart from you for another moment." His control shattered. One hand slid up to cup the back of her neck, fingers threading through her loose hair. The other wrapped around her waist, pulling her against him with a gentleness that belied the intensity in his eyes. "Tell me to stop," he said, his voice rough. "Tell me to walk you back inside and leave you at your door like a gentleman should." "No," Kate breathed. "Do not stop." James made a sound low in his throat, surrender and relief and want all mixed together. Then he was kissing her, not with the tentative care of the conservatory, but with a hunger that had been building since the moment they met. Kate kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands sliding up to his shoulders, gripping the fabric of his shirt, as if he were the only solid thing in a tilting world. His lips were warm and demanding, tasting of mint and something darker, something uniquely him. The kiss deepened. James's hand tightened in her hair, tilting her head to give him better access, and Kate felt heat flood through her body despite the cold morning air. When his tongue traced the seam of her lips, she opened for him without hesitation, and the intimacy of it made her knees weaken. James must have felt her sway because suddenly they were moving, his arms supporting her as he guided her backward until her back met the stone wall hidden behind the climbing roses. The cold of the stone contrasted sharply with the heat of his body pressed against hers, and Kate gasped at the sensation. He pulled back immediately, breathing hard, eyes dark with concern and poorly restrained desire. "Did I hurt you?" "No," Kate managed, her own breathing ragged. "Do not stop. Please do not stop. Kate." He said her name like a prayer and a warning. "If we continue, if I keep touching you like this, I will not be able to maintain control." "Then do not maintain control," Kate whispered, emboldened by the darkness and the privacy and the desperate need coursing through her veins. "I do not want your control, James. I want you." The words unleashed something in him. He claimed her mouth again, this time with no pretense of restraint. His hands mapped the curves of her body through the thin silk, learning the shape of her with a reverence that made her feel worshipped and desired in equal measure. Kate's fingers found the buttons of his shirt, working them free with trembling hands. She needed to feel his skin, needed to know that he was as affected by this as she was. When her palms finally touched the warm skin of his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath her hands, James groaned against her mouth. "We should go inside," he murmured against her lips, even as his hands continued their exploration. "There is a cottage at the edge of the garden. My mother used it for painting. It has a fireplace, a bed." Kate pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "Take me there." "Are you certain?" "Once we cross this threshold, Kate, there is no going back. Society will expect." "I am certain," Kate interrupted. "I have spent my entire life being careful, being proper, being what others expected me to be. Just this once, James, let me choose what I want. Let me choose you." His answer was to sweep her into his arms, carrying her as if she weighed nothing. Kate wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of him, sandalwood and warmth and safety. The cottage appeared through the morning mist, small and ivy-covered, its windows dark. James managed the door one-handed, and then they were inside and he was kicking the door closed behind them, and Kate was sliding down his body until her feet touched the floor. The cottage was simple but clean, with a fireplace already laid with wood as if waiting for them. James released her only long enough to strike a match and light the fire, and then the room was filling with flickering warmth and golden light. He turned back to her, and in the firelight his face was all sharp angles and shadows, beautiful and slightly dangerous. "Last chance, Kate. Tell me to take you back to the house." Kate reached for the tie of her dressing gown and slowly pulled it free. The silk parted, revealing the thin nightgown beneath, and she watched James's eyes darken with want. "I am not going back," she said quietly. "I am exactly where I want to be." James crossed to her in 2 strides. His hands trembled slightly as they slid the dressing gown from her shoulders, letting it pool at her feet. Then he was kissing her again, slower this time, savoring instead of devouring. They moved together toward the narrow bed in the corner, a tangle of careful touches and whispered names. James laid her down with infinite gentleness, his body covering hers, and Kate felt the weight of him anchoring her to this moment, this choice, this impossible brave step into the unknown. His lips traced down her neck, finding the pulse point that made her gasp. His hands mapped her body with reverence, as if learning sacred text. And when Kate tugged at his shirt, needing more, needing all of him, he helped her remove it, then continued his careful worship of her skin. There was no rush, no frantic scrambling, only the slow, deliberate joining of 2 people who had both forgotten what it meant to be touched with tenderness. James whispered her name against her skin, told her she was beautiful, asked permission with every new touch until Kate was nearly mad with wanting him. And when they finally came together, when their bodies joined in the oldest dance of intimacy and trust, Kate understood for the first time what it meant to be fully seen. Not just looked at, but truly seen. Flaws and fears and all. James moved within her with controlled passion, his forehead pressed to hers, their breaths mingling in the firelit darkness. Kate held him close, her hands mapping the muscles of his back, feeling the tension coiled beneath his skin as he fought to make this good for her, to make this matter. "I see you," he whispered against her lips. "Kate, I see all of you. And you are breathtaking." Kate's answer was lost in a gasp as pleasure built and crested and swept her away. James followed moments later, her name a broken prayer on his lips, and they clung to each other as if they were the only solid things in a world made of water and light. Afterward, they lay tangled together beneath a blanket James pulled from a chest, the fire crackling softly beside them. Kate's head rested on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling more at peace than she had ever felt in her life. James's fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. "No regrets?" he asked quietly. Kate tilted her head to look up at him. "None. You?" He kissed her forehead, tender and sweet. "Only that I did not find you sooner." Outside, the sky was lightening to pearl gray. Dawn was coming, bringing with it all the complexities of the world they would have to face. But here, in this small cottage at the edge of a garden, wrapped in each other's arms and the warmth of the fire, Kate and James held onto the perfect simplicity of this moment. They had chosen each other, and whatever came next, they would face it together. 3 days after the dawn in the cottage, London society had reached a fever pitch of speculation. The morning rooms of Mayfair buzzed with whispers about the Duke of Everley and the obscure Miss Whitmore. Some called it romantic, others called it scandalous. Most simply could not understand it. Kate sat in the drawing room of the Dowager Duchess's townhouse, a cup of tea cooling in her hands, while Aunt Beatrice read aloud from the society pages with obvious amusement. "Listen to this one," the elderly woman said, her eyes twinkling behind her spectacles. "Sources close to the Duke suggest his interest in Miss Whitmore stems from charitable impulses rather than romantic inclination. One wonders if His Grace has confused pity for affection." Kate flinched despite herself. The words were designed to cut, to reduce what she and James had shared to something small and pathetic. Aunt Beatrice set down the paper with a snort of disgust. Drivel. Absolute drivel, written by small-minded people who cannot conceive that a man might choose a woman for her character rather than her connections. She studied Kate over the rim of her teacup. "You are not letting this poison seep in, are you, child?" "I am trying not to," Kate admitted. "But it is difficult when everywhere I turn, someone is telling me I am not good enough. Then they are wrong." Aunt Beatrice's voice was firm. "I have known James since he was in leading strings. I watched him love Caroline with his whole heart, and I watched him die inside when she left him. I have not seen him truly alive in 3 years. Until you." Before Kate could respond, the butler appeared in the doorway, his expression troubled. "Miss Whitmore, there is a gentleman here to see you. A Mr. Edwin Pierce. He insists the matter is urgent." Kate's stomach dropped. Edwin, the man who had courted her briefly and cruelly, who had whispered poison at the wedding, who represented everything about society that had made her feel worthless. "I do not wish to see him," Kate said. "He claims it concerns your reputation," the butler added apologetically. "He says you will want to hear what he has to say." Aunt Beatrice's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Show him in. But remain within earshot, Henderson. If Mr. Pierce so much as raises his voice, you have my permission to forcibly remove him." Edwin Pierce entered with the careful confidence of a man who believed himself to hold power. He was dressed impeccably, his mustache groomed to perfection, his smile just shy of a sneer. "Miss Whitmore," he said, bowing, "how delightful to see you looking so well. Your current circumstances seem to suit you." Kate remained seated, refusing to stand for him. "Mr. Pierce, state your business and leave." His smile widened. Direct as always. "Very well. I have come to offer you a way out of the predicament you find yourself in." "I am not in a predicament," Kate replied coolly. "Are you not?" Edwin moved closer, lowering his voice though Aunt Beatrice could still hear every word. "Society is tearing your name to pieces, Miss Whitmore. They are calling you grasping, opportunistic, a fortune hunter who has somehow ensnared a grieving duke. Your family is humiliated. Your brother is considering disowning you." Kate's hands tightened on her teacup, but she kept her voice steady. "If you came here to tell me things I already know, you have wasted your time." "I came to offer you marriage," Edwin said smoothly. "Marry me instead of pursuing this impossible fantasy with Everley. I can give you respectability, a quiet life in the country, an end to the gossip. All you need do is break off whatever understanding you have with the Duke." Kate stared at him, astonished. "And why would you possibly want to marry me? You made your disinterest abundantly clear last season." Edwin's mask slipped slightly, revealing calculation beneath the charm. "Because His Grace has made it clear he will financially ruin anyone who continues to slander you. Several of my investments depend on his goodwill. Marrying you would demonstrate my support of his choice while also removing you from his sphere before you can fully trap him." The honesty of his mercenary motivations was almost refreshing. Kate set down her teacup with deliberate care. "I see. And if I refuse, then I will be forced to reveal certain information about your behavior at Ashborne Hall. Information about how you were seen leaving the conservatory in a state of undress, how you spent an unseemly amount of time alone with His Grace, how your conduct was far from innocent. It was blackmail, pure and simple." Kate felt rage kindle in her chest. white-hot and clarifying. Before she could respond, the drawing room door opened again. James stood in the threshold, still in his riding clothes, his grey eyes cold as winter ice. "Mr. Pierce," he said quietly. "How unfortunate. I had hoped I would not have to deal with you personally." Edwin paled but rallied quickly. "Your Grace, I was just offering Miss Whitmore an honourable solution to her situation." "Were you?" James moved into the room with predatory grace. It sounded remarkably like blackmail from where I stood. Threats about revealing information, demands for marriage, talk of trapping and ruining. Quite the honourable offer. "I merely thought," Edwin began. "You thought you could manipulate Miss Whitmore using fear and shame." James's voice was soft, dangerous. "You thought wrong." He moved to stand beside Kate's chair, one hand coming to rest on her shoulder in a gesture of unmistakable protection. "Miss Whitmore's behaviour at Ashborne Hall was beyond reproach. Any insinuation otherwise is slander, and I will pursue legal action against anyone who spreads such lies. Do I make myself clear?" Edwin swallowed hard. "Your Grace, I meant no offence." "You meant every offence." James's grip on Kate's shoulder tightened slightly, grounding her. "But you miscalculated. Miss Whitmore is not alone and friendless anymore. She has my protection, my aunt's sponsorship, and the backing of this family's name and resources. If you choose to move against her, you will find yourself facing far more than financial ruin." The threat hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Edwin's face had gone from pale to flushed, his carefully constructed confidence crumbling. "Now leave," James continued, "and spread the word among your fellow gossips that Kate Whitmore is to be respected. Because in 3 weeks' time she will be the Duchess of Everleigh, and anyone who has slandered her will find themselves unwelcome in every drawing room that matters." Kate's breath caught. 3 weeks, marriage. He was announcing it here now, publicly, in front of Edwin Pierce, who would ensure all of London knew by nightfall. Edwin bowed stiffly and retreated, his face a mask of barely suppressed rage. The moment the door closed behind him, Kate found her voice. "James, you cannot announce our marriage to Edwin Pierce, of all people." "Why not?" He came to Kate's chair and knelt beside it, taking her hands in his. "Let him spread the news. Let society scramble to adjust its opinions. Let your family understand that their threats and manipulations are meaningless, because you have chosen your own path." "But 3 weeks," Kate whispered. "That is so soon." "Is it?" James raised one of her hands to his lips. "I have already waited 3 years to feel alive again, Kate. I do not wish to wait any longer than necessary." He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. This was Caroline's. She wanted me to give it to whoever I chose to love again. He opened the box to reveal a brooch in the shape of a camellia, the petals crafted from pink pearls, the center a small diamond. It was beautiful and understated and perfect. "The camellia represents constancy," James said softly. "Unchanging devotion. Caroline wore it on our wedding day." He looked up at Kate, vulnerability and hope warring in his eyes. "Will you wear it on ours?" Kate's vision blurred with tears. She thought of Caroline, generous even in death, blessing this union through the gift of her jewelry. She thought of James, kneeling before her with his heart in his hands. She thought of the girl she had been 3 days ago, invisible and unvalued, and the woman she was becoming. "Yes," she whispered, "I will wear it. I will marry you. I choose this, James. I choose us." He stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her close enough that she could feel his heart pounding against hers. The drawing room door opened, and Aunt Beatrice appeared with a satisfied smile. "I assume congratulations are in order." 3 weeks, James confirmed, not releasing Kate. "St. George's, Hanover Square. And I want everyone who ever dismissed Kate Whitmore to witness her becoming a duchess." Aunt Beatrice's smile turned fierce. "Oh, this will be delicious." She moved to a writing desk and pulled out stationery. "I shall begin the invitations immediately, starting with Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore and that dreadful daughter-in-law." Kate pulled back slightly to look at James. "My family will come?" "They will come," James said firmly, "because they will not dare refuse. And they will watch you stand beside me and understand, finally, that you were never the one who was lacking. They were." He pinned the camellia brooch to her dress, his fingers gentle against the fabric. "There. perfect, constant, unchanging. Kate touched the brooch, feeling the smooth pearls beneath her fingertips. 3 weeks until she would stand in a church and pledge her life to this man. 3 weeks until she would no longer be Kate Whitmore, but Kate Cavendish, Duchess of Everleigh. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. Outside, London continued to whisper and speculate and judge. But inside the drawing room, 3 people who understood what truly mattered began planning a wedding that would silence the gossips once and for all, not through scandal or drama, but through the undeniable truth of 2 people who had chosen each other despite every obstacle placed in their path. Respect, Kate was learning, was not something society bestowed. It was something you claimed for yourself, and she was done apologizing for taking what had always been hers by right. 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of fittings and flowers, of calling cards and carefully orchestrated appearances in Hyde Park, where society could observe the Duke of Everleigh and his intended bride. Kate learned to navigate the stares and whispers with her head held high, James's steady presence beside her, a constant reminder that she was not alone. But today was different. Today, James had invited a select group to Everleigh House for the formal announcement of their engagement. The guest list was small but significant. Aunt Beatrice, of course, a handful of James's closest friends, and at Kate's request, her family. Kate stood in the morning room, watching rain clouds gather over the gardens. The weather had been unseasonably warm, creating the kind of late autumn storm that felt more like summer. All heat and electricity, with none of winter's bite. "You are nervous," James observed, coming to stand beside her. Kate glanced at him, taking in the formal black coat and perfectly tied cravat. Even now, after weeks of stolen kisses and whispered promises, the sight of him still made her breath catch. "I'm afraid they will say something that will ruin this. That will make me doubt. Then I will remind you why you chose this." He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Kate, in 3 days, you will become my Duchess. Nothing your family says or does can change that unless you wish it to." "I do not wish it to," Kate said firmly. "But I would like their blessing if such a thing is possible. Then let us find out." They walked together through the house and out to the gardens, where servants had arranged chairs beneath an ancient oak tree. The rain had not yet begun, but the air felt charged, expectant, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. Aunt Beatrice was already seated, resplendent in purple silk and diamonds, looking every inch the formidable dowager she was. James's friends, Lord Hartley and Sir William Thornton, stood nearby with glasses of champagne, their expressions carefully neutral. And there, standing awkwardly near the rose arbor, was Kate's family. Thomas looked older than he had at his wedding, lines of tension around his eyes. Eleanor stood rigidly beside him, her face an unreadable mask. Lydia was notably absent, and Kate felt a flicker of relief at not having to face her former tormentor. James led Kate to the center of the gathering, his hand never leaving hers. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly across the garden. "Thank you all for coming today. As you know, Miss Whitmore has done me the extraordinary honor of agreeing to become my wife. We gather here not to seek approval, for our choice is made, but to share our joy with those who matter to us." He turned to Kate, and the tenderness in his eyes made her throat tighten. "Kate has taught me that the heart can survive breaking, that it can heal and love again, perhaps more deeply for having known loss. She has given me hope and purpose, and the courage to step back into life instead of merely observing it from a distance." Kate felt tears prick her eyes but refused to let them fall. Not yet. Not until she had said what needed to be said. "Your grace is too generous," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "3 weeks ago I believed myself invisible, unworthy of being chosen or cherished, and then you looked at me in the rain and saw someone worth fighting for. You gave me the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. You gave me myself." A slight movement caught her eye. Thomas had stepped forward, his face pale, his hands clenched at his sides. "Kate," he said, his voice rough. "Might I have a word?" James's hand tightened on hers, protective, but Kate squeezed back reassuringly. "Of course." Thomas approached slowly, as if afraid she might bolt. When he reached her, he stopped and seemed to struggle for words. Finally, he said simply, "I am sorry." The words hung in the air, insufficient and yet desperately sincere. "I am sorry I did not see how Lydia treated you," Thomas continued, his voice breaking slightly. "I am sorry I allowed Mother to diminish you for so long. I am sorry I was so focused on my own advancement that I forgot to protect my sister." He looked at James, then back at Kate. "You deserved better from me. You deserved better from all of us." Kate felt something crack open in her chest, a wound she had not realized she was still carrying. She had not expected an apology, had not dared to hope for one. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than you know." Eleanor stepped forward then, her rigid control finally showing cracks. "Kate," she said stiffly, "I will not pretend I understand what His Grace sees in you. But I see what you have become in these weeks, stronger, certain, no longer the mouse who apologized for existing. It was not exactly an apology, but coming from Eleanor Whitmore, it was as close as Kate would likely get. And perhaps, Kate realized, it was enough. She did not need her mother's understanding. She only needed acknowledgement that she had changed, had grown, had become someone worthy of respect. "I hope you will attend the wedding," Kate said quietly. "I would like my family there." Eleanor inclined her head, a gesture that might have been agreement or simply acknowledgement. Thomas smiled, tentative but real. The first drops of rain began to fall, warm and fat, spattering against the gravel paths. James pulled Kate close, sheltering her under his arm as the storm broke overhead. Everyone rushed for the house, laughing and holding hands over their heads, but James and Kate remained in the garden, letting the rain wash over them. Kate tilted her face up to the sky, feeling the water streak down her cheeks, mixing with tears she no longer tried to hide. James turned her to face him, his hands framing her face, his grey eyes soft with love. "Do you remember the first words I spoke to you?" Kate smiled through her tears. "Pretend you are with me." He leaned close, his forehead touching hers, rainwater dripping from his hair onto her upturned face. "Say them again," he murmured. "The real words, the truth." Kate's hands came up to cover his, holding him close. "I do not pretend anymore," she whispered. "I am with you, James, truly, completely, forever." His kiss was gentle and fierce all at once, a promise sealed in summer rain and autumn chill. When they finally pulled apart, both were drenched and breathless and smiling like fools. "Come," James said, taking her hand. "Let us go inside before Aunt Beatrice scolds us for catching our deaths." But as they turned toward the house, Kate paused to look back at the garden, at the place where her family had stood, where apologies had been offered and tentative bridges built. She thought of the girl who had stood on a terrace 3 weeks ago, invisible and unloved, and could barely recognize her. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who had been seen, chosen, cherished. A woman who would stand in a church in 3 days and pledge her life to a man who had given her the courage to claim her own worth. The rain continued to fall, washing away the last traces of who she had been and blessing who she was becoming. Inside the house, champagne was being poured, toasts were being made. Aunt Beatrice was already planning seating arrangements with military precision. The wedding machinery had begun its inevitable march towards St. George's, Hanover Square. But here, in the rain-soaked garden of Everleigh House, Kate and James took one more moment for themselves, one more stolen kiss before they stepped into the roles society would demand of them. Duke and Duchess, husband and wife, partners in scandal and salvation. James pulled her close, his lips brushing her temple. "Ready for our next adventure, Duchess?" Kate smiled against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her cheek. "With you? Always." The storm raged overhead, but Kate had learned that storms were not things to be feared. They were wild and powerful and cleansing, washing away what no longer served and leaving space for new growth. 3 days until vows spoken in winter light. 3 days until she became Kate Cavendish, Duchess of Everleigh. 3 days until the love that had begun as pretense became unshakable truth. But standing here in the rain with James's arms around her and laughter floating from the house behind them, Kate realized the transformation was already complete. She had stopped pretending the moment she chose to be brave, the moment she chose to be seen, the moment she chose love. And as thunder rolled across the London sky and rain blessed the gardens of Everleigh House, Kate Whitmore took her Duke's hand and walked toward her future, head high, heart open, finally, gloriously free. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is not fighting against the world, but refusing to shrink yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. Kate learned that being seen was not a gift to be bestowed by others, but a choice she made for herself. She learned that love does not rescue us from ourselves, but gives us the strength to become who we were always meant to be. James discovered that the heart can break and heal and love again, perhaps more deeply for having known loss. That grief and joy can coexist, that honoring the past does not mean abandoning the future. Together they proved that the most scandalous thing you can do is choose yourself. Choose to be visible. Choose to believe you are worthy of the love you desire. What would your life look like if you stopped pretending? If you stopped making yourself small to fit someone else's expectations? What storms might you walk through if you knew someone would be standing beside you in the rain? Perhaps that is the question we should all be asking ourselves. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like to help others find it. Subscribe to hear more stories about courage, love, and the power of choosing yourself. And comment below telling me where in the world you are listening from. I love knowing this story reached you, wherever you are. Until we meet again, remember, you were never invisible. You were simply waiting for the courage to be seen.